Hey, Jim, how are you?
Doing pretty well given the circumstances, Grant.
Absolutely. It's definitely a different time for all of us. And I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about just kind of how to coach athletes and parents and coaches through this time. Obviously, in the next 30 minutes or so, there's going to be so many different topics we're gonna cover and uncover within youth sports. So I'm really excited to have you on my show and just kind of get inside your mindset and dig in a little bit about youth sports.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's get into my favorite topic and before we get into um, the interview itself. But let's talk about mental toughness. When you think about those two words, mental toughness, what does that mean to you?
Well, I've got a couple examples. I really love the movie Gandhi years and years ago. And there's a scene in that when he's at a demonstration and they're burning identity cards that Indians in South Africa have to, new law, they have to carry them. And he goes up and he's burning these cards, and a policeman comes and whacks him on the head with a baton. He falls down. He gets up and starts dumping him in again, whams him again. And he, like a third time, he's trying to get up, and finally the guy hits him and he stays down for a while. And I remember showing that to my girls basketball team at Fremont High School in Sunnyvale years ago, that toughness is getting back up. Courage is getting back up. It's not never getting knocked down. And another way I'll describe it is I really love poetry. In fact, I teach an online spiritual poetry class every week. And Piet Hein is I think he's from the Netherlands or Holland. Maybe those are the same place. Um, and he has a little couplet. He says, "To be brave, to be brave is to behave bravely when you're feeling faint. So you can be really brave only when you really ain't."
Wow. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. Now, through your whole career, going through creating Positive Coaching Alliance, you've created this really cool platform and structure. Going through your whole career, can you share like a moment where you had to be mentally tough yourself? A specific time?
Yeah, it was early on. Positive Coaching Alliance. I was an employee of Stanford University, and I worked for the Stanford Business School. And then I wanted to start Positive Coaching Alliance, so I went over to see Ted Leland, the athletic director, and he created a job for me. And gave me an office, and I was in this dark little office over in Robley Gym on way across the campus from the business school where I'd been. And I was it was a it was an office that had no internet hookup.
Wow.
You could call out on a telephone, but it didn't ring when somebody called you, so you didn't know if somebody was calling you. Um, and it was way away from everybody I knew on campus, but it did have a couch. And I used to curl up on that couch in the fetal position and just kind of like, what have I gotten myself into here?
Yeah.
And Dan Whalen, longtime friend and an original board member of Positive Coaching Alliance, he also may have been the first donor and just a really wonderful person. I called him up and I said, "Hey, could we have lunch? I really need to talk to you." And he came down to Stanford and we had lunch at the faculty club. And I said, "What do you remember about starting your company?" He started a really fabulously successful company. I said, "What do you remember about starting the company?" And he said, "I remember being weary all the time."
Mm.
And that was really motivating for me because I felt weary most of the time. And it's like, I can get through this.
And what was, if you don't mind sharing, like what allowed you to kind of get through it, push through it, have that mental toughness? What was that motivator?
Well, um, I think ideas are the big motivator.
Mm.
at least for me. Um, Being able to see the future that you are trying to envision,
Yeah.
um, and it. I talked to a lot of people. I was teaching a class in coaching and leadership through the continuing studies program at Stanford. And just a whole bunch of really fabulous people came through, people who later became board members and real strong supporters of Positive Coaching Alliance. And when I would talk to them about this crazy idea I had of starting an organization to deal with the problems in youth sports, everybody said, yes, yes, that's what we need. Bill Drayton, who is the founder of Ashoka, which supports social entrepreneurs, and he's a winner of the MacArthur Genius Award as well. He came to speak to some of my students when I was at the Stanford Business School. And after he was done speaking, I walked him to his car and I said, hey, I got this idea. And I told him about the idea. And he said, I hear music.
Ah,
And so those moments of, up, I call them the FUDs, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I have a lot of FUDs,
yeah.
and they come and go. If I do my spiritual disciplines, if I meditate in the morning, write in my journal, read some poetry, the FUDs tend to dissipate, but they keep coming back. And but it's when something really positive like that happens,
Yeah.
um, I can ride on that for a while.
Yeah. And that resonates with me just because outside of being a mental performance coach and an athlete, I'm a musician as well. And music is,
Yeah, I see that guitar behind you.
yeah, that's one of them. It's music is vibration, it's rhythm, it's connection. And so when you get to connect to that and plug into it, there's so many good things that can happen. And so that's just awesome. As soon as you said that, I hear music, man, that I don't know, I felt that. That's pretty cool. Now, when you think about your whole career so far, over the last 22 plus years, this might be a hard question to answer, but what's been your proudest moment?
Long pause.
I love it. I love it.
um, I've been married for 47 plus years now. um, it hasn't felt like it's been really hard. Sandra is my spiritual guide, and she's just an incredible person. My son Gabriel is a writer. He started writing books before, at an age before I did, and
Right.
he's already got 5 written, and he's very successful at it. He's got a wonderful family, my daughter-in-law, kid, grandchildren, Rafi and Lila. Certainly, starting Positive Coaching Alliance, my wife and I helped found Recovery Cafe San Jose, which is a healing community for people suffering from homelessness, mental illness, and drug addiction. Um, I don't know. I just certainly writing books is not easy for me. I've done a lot of them, but
Right.
it's not easy. So there's a lot of things I feel good about. Pride, proud, I don't know. I'm so aware of all the people who help contribute to those accomplishments. It certainly wasn't me alone. So
Right.
probably a pretty non-responsive answer there.
Well, when you started this journey, over 2 decades ago, did you know that you were going to transform youth sports culture?
Well, that was the goal. And as much as I'd like to just nod my head at what you said, I don't think we have.
Mm,
We've made a difference. I think the biggest impact Positive Coaching Alliance has had. When I started, there was one coach who sort of dominated. He was the icon of coaching. Would you happen to remember who that was 20 some years ago?
uh, wooden?
Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight. Yes.
And, Phil Jackson and I are both from North Dakota, although I didn't know him at that time. And he got involved very early and made a huge difference. And he talked about the impact that Bobby Knight had. And I learned not to say anything about Bobby Knight, not to say anything good, not to say anything bad, because people in the audience were so polarized about him.
Yeah.
Well, the idea back then, 20 some years ago, was that to be a good coach, even for 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, you have to be kind of a hard ass. You gotta make it tough for them. And I once interviewed Bill Walsh shortly before he died. He was a huge supporter as well, and he said, it bothered him so much. One of the reasons he got involved with Positive Coaching Alliance, it bothered him so much that kids, boys, couldn't wait to play football. And then they go to their first practice, they're so excited, and the coach makes them show, what kind of a tough man they are. Well, first of all, the idea of toughness and manhood is, I like what Joe Ehrman says about manhood. Being a man is who you love and who you allow to love you, and the larger cause that you're involved with. It's not about being nasty, snarly, but that was the norm. And I think even though Positive Coaching Alliance hasn't changed the whole culture of youth sports, it has changed the idea of good coaching. Phil Jackson was seen as kind of a weirdo initially because he was so positive and he didn't scream at his players all that much. And now you got Steve Kerr and Brad Stevens, and the norm now is becoming more and more coaches who are positive and build people up. So we got ways to go, and that's part of what my new book is on, which I kind of characterize as youth sports meets climate change. But we've made some big progress.
Absolutely. For sure. And I will share with you a little bit, my experience growing up. I played football for 13 years. I had the opportunity to play all sports. Not all, but I played, baseball, basketball, soccer, track, football. But football was my sport. But I started that game when I was about 7, 8 years old. And I would remember from all the way up until college, I had great coaches from depending on the team and the coach at the time, but the language that was used, it was like the things that I was hearing when I was 10 years old it was appalling when you think about it. And that's how they motivated you. But now I feel like we've shifted the pendulum. Do you feel like, and a lot of it, we've done it for the good, but do you think that we're getting too sensitive when we're at this point? I feel like our culture can't be sensitive. We can't say this. We can't push them. We can't, because
I did a podcast with John Gordon. You probably know John.
For sure.
Incredibly positive guy and so prolific. I mean, it seems like he's coming out with a new book every month or so, and they're good. Right? Everyone is good.
Yep.
But I did a podcast with him when I was doing one for Positive Coaching Alliance, and I asked him, we talked about toughness, and I said, where does toughness come from? No, I said, no, I did say, where's toughness come from? And he said, he paused and he said, wow, that's a really good question. And he said, it comes from connections. And I participated in a book club reading Lost Connections by Johann Hari. That's Hari, Lost Connections. And Hari was somebody who was, he was depressed most of his life. He's an amazing writer. I recommend anybody read this book, Lost Connections. And he was told over and over again that there was something wrong with his brain. That's why he was depressed. And so they gave him drugs. And what he discovered, that didn't help at all. What really helps is the connections we have. First of all, the connections to people, but the connections to good values. If we're coaching and we want to win so badly that we cheat or bend the rules, that's disconnection. That's a disconnection. Right. Disconnections from, our potential future. So many kids don't see themselves as having a future. And I think one of the things coaches can do is they can say, they can help kids develop a sense of purpose. Bill Damon, who's at Stanford University, wrote a book called The Path to Purpose.
Mm.
And it's just, the book is so good. And Bill was on our National Advisory Board for many years, but I hadn't read the book. I read it like 7 or 8 years after he wrote it. And I went through and I got page after page of quotes that I just pulled out of it. One of them is, when young people have a sense of purpose, you almost can't hold them back.
Mm.
And purpose is the number one long-term motivator in life. So going back to your question earlier, what kept me going with Positive Coaching Alliance in those dark days, and that office I had in Robley Gym was dark, it was a sense of purpose. There's something here. I have a chance to do something here. Killian No, who's the founder of Recovery Cafe up in Seattle, the original one, I helped start one down here in San Jose. She once talked about St. Francis of Assisi, who died at the age of 42 from a plague or some kind of disease that there was no cure for at that time. And he said, I am not discouraged because I have done what has been given for me to do.
Mm.
And I keep coming back to that. What has been given for me to do? Can I do that? Can I focus on that? And if I do, then I need to be satisfied with that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, I want to bring up this because it's popped in my mind, especially when you brought up Joe Ehrman and football. You know, that's a sport where, you know, it's machismo, and you know, back in the day, at least when I was playing, there was a lot of screaming and yelling. You got to be tough. And what's interesting, I had Keith Mitchell was on my show not too long ago. He's a former Pro Bowl linebacker for the Saints. He's now turned yogi. He's living a spiritual path, and he's incredible. He's transformed his body that doesn't even look like he was a football player. But as we were talking about femininity and masculinity within sports, he basically said that you cannot get to the elite level in athletics without tapping into your femininity. And I was like, well, wait, like, what does that mean? He goes, when you get to that elite level, whether if it's professional sports or the Olympics, you have to learn how to finesse, whether it's finesse your body, finesse your language, finesse how to deal with situations. And he goes, and finessing is a feminine trait. And I was like, wow, it was an interesting perspective. So my question is, as we're teaching these young adults, these young athletes, is there a space where we can teach how to bring out their the balance of masculinity and femininity?
Absolutely. You know, that lost connection idea from Johann Hari, losing connection with the feminine part of ourselves, that also is alienating. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine, this was a long time ago, I'd never heard of Joe Ehrman, and a friend of mine sent me a videotape in the mail of Joe Ehrman being interviewed on Real Sports. I'm forgetting the name of the person who did Real Sports, but I put it on, and there was this big, strong guy saying, what is our purpose as coaches? And the players saying, to love us. And what's your purpose as teammates? And to love each other. It's not so shocking now, but it was shocking at the time.
Yeah.
And I think if Joe Ehrman had been a librarian and, looked like the fact that he was so obviously masculine and so obviously strong and tough, and was tough enough to tap into that feminine side of himself. Like I said, it's not so shocking now, because a friend of mine, Jerry Lynch, who is just a wonderful sports psychologist and works with hundreds of teams. He's got a new book coming out called The Competitive Buddha.
Oh, wow.
And he asked me to write a blurb for it, which I did because it's a really interesting book. And the thing about Buddhism is the ideas from sports psychology and the ideas from Buddhism, they are totally in sync.
Totally.
And I don't just say Buddhism because I've meditated, done mindfulness meditation for a long time, and I did the Jesus prayer for a long time, where the mantra you use is Yeshua, which was Jesus's name in Aramaic, and that meditation. I just watched the 10 hours of The Last Dance about Phil Jackson and Michael
Yeah.
Jordan and the Bulls,
Right.
and the meditation. At one point, one of the people that worked out with him, or is not a sports psychologist exactly, but anyway, he said the difference between Michael Jordan and everybody else is that he was always in the moment. He was never allowing a thought to come into his head, think like, oh, we might lose, or I might make a mistake. Or now he did make mistakes, and there's that famous commercial where he says,
Right.
47 times I missed
Yeah.
the winning shot.
Right.
And that all made sense, that he was, you could argue with whether it was good for him to be so focused
Right.
on just winning. But boy, that really hit with me. So this idea of the concepts of Buddhism, and Thomas Keating, who is a wonderful man, a Catholic priest who died recently, and he centering prayer is what it's called, not the Jesus prayer, centering prayer. And he was concerned because all these Americans were going to India to learn to meditate. And he said, well, there's a long Christian tradition of meditation too. And so he revived that. So anyway, that's you got me going.
I love it. Well, because I agree with you. I think now we're going to talk here in a second about transformational coaching. And I know you're probably familiar with Sarah High School in San Mateo, which I spent a lot of time.
Yeah, we worked with them.
Yeah. And the football coach there, and I've coached football there. I actually started my mental performance coaching there, actually. So there's a special spot in my heart for that high school and that institution.
They had a couple of good athletes come out of there too.
Oh, just a couple. Just a couple. But the head coach, Patrick Walsh, and I've brought him up a lot on my podcast, but since we're talking about this idea of vulnerability and femininity, if you've ever met the man who's ultra competitor, he's intense, but he's one of my favorite coaches that I've been associated with, coached with, I learned from, because he knows the balance of pushing his athletes, but he knows how to coach the heart of the athlete. But he does certain things, like when he has a parent conference, that first meeting in the beginning of the season, he says, if you don't like me telling your son that I love him on a daily basis and hugging him and kissing him, I don't want him on the team, because I'm taking care of your son, and this is the love and passion that I give to my team. And I don't hear a lot of coaches doing that. I know there's some, but the fact that he says that, and I see it all the time, it's refreshing, especially in the game of football when you have somebody doing that. And I think that opens up vulnerability and that femininity piece, which I think is very healthy.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Patrick. Done an incredible job. I will say though that I hadn't heard that story before. It sounds a little bit like My Way or the Highway. That and I think one of the things that Phil Jackson was so great at, Steve Kerr, Brad Stevens, Herm Edwards, the great coaches, is their flexibility. That when Dennis Rodman joined the Bulls, Jackson said, I don't care what color your hair is. I don't care if you go out and drink until 3 a.m. Are you going to be here for the team? And David Bradford, who I taught with at, he and Jerry Porras, Deb Meyerson at Stanford Business School, he talked about core values and peripheral values. And it's such a powerful concept because when I was in high school, I had hair, and it came just down to over here. And my football coach said, if you don't, if you don't put that hair up, I'm going to knock you across the room or whatever. I was totally committed to the team. I worked really hard. I did everything I could to be successful. That's the core value, whether I had my hair a little long.
Right.
And I think coaches really need to understand that. If you make peripheral values super important and my way or the highway kinds of things, you're going to drive some kids away who could really benefit from being on your team.
Got it. That totally makes sense. And it's interesting because it's kind of it's an interesting paradigm when I think about that particular situation, because it is my way or the highway, but it's all around love. It's not, I mean, you know what I mean? It's not like,
No, I'm not criticizing. It just struck me as,
yeah,
if I can't do exactly what I want with your kid,
that
I don't want
too.
you on the team.
That's right. That's right. I got a point.
But let's talk about transformational coaching.
Let's do that. So I'll just throw it out there. What does that mean to you? What is transformational coaching?
Well, for me, it's all about identity. Jim March, who was a professor of mine, actually my boss for a little while at Stanford Business School, one of the smartest guys who ever walked the face of the earth. He died last summer, sadly. He's all about identity. And he would say, like, why do people do what they do? Well, a lot of people do because if you do X, you get rewarded. If you do Y, you get punished. So you don't want to do Y. He said there's another reason why people do things, and that is to live up to their identity of themselves. And his favorite book was Don Quixote, who said, I know who I am. So the book that I've been working on I mentioned before to you before we started this,
Yeah.
I've been working on 8 or 9 or 10 years, and it's really evolved, but it's all about identity. And can we help kids aspire to an identity that will help them become the kind of person they want to become? I grew up in North Dakota, and my dad and grandfather were farmers. And the blizzards were so bad, and it was, it's getting warmer in the Midwest. The whole world was warming up, but some of those blizzards were so bad that they would string a rope to the barn. If it's really snowing badly, you can't just say, well, I'm going to stay inside today. You got cows to milk and animals to feed. So they would follow that rope out to the barn, and then they'd follow it back to the home and make sure, because people would actually die. They'd freeze to death, like
Right.
just yards away from safety, but they couldn't see it. So I'm using that metaphor of the rope to the barn. What is our rope to the barn that allows us to go out and do the things we need to do and to get back to safety? And I think it's identity. And Eric Erickson, back in 1970, coined a term called generativity. Generativity is a commitment to and a focus on future generations. So as a baby, I think about, oh, it's just me, me, me. In fact, I don't even see anything else. It's just me. And then I realize, oh, there's my mother and my father. And then as we get older and older, there's more and more people. And we incorporate them into our lives. And generativity goes way beyond that. It's about the people we don't even see. How can we benefit the people who are going to come after us? And that's where the book took a real shift when I started to learn about climate change, because we had to stay inside most of last week because the air quality from fires that were quite a ways away from us, but were so bad. And it's really, it's coming down the pike. The climate change is going to be the opening chapter in my book is called a harsh new world. the world that our kids and their kids and their kids are going to grow up in is not the world that you and I grew up in. It's going to be so incredibly harsh. And what our society needs, what our world needs, is highly generative people, people who are doing what needs to be done to help the future. And the term I've coined for that is being an elevator. And that's elevator with an ER, not elevator OR. Elevator with OR goes up and down.
Right.
As one of the women at Recovery Cafe, after a class I was teaching on being an elevator, she said, "This elevator only goes up." An elevator is someone, a highly generative person, someone who in every situation they're in, they're looking around saying, how can I make this situation better? It may be awful, but how can I make it better?
Hmm.
And coaches are in an incredible position to help young people become elevators, to aspire to that, to become the kind of people who can be successful and contributing, who can make it through this harsh new world, and can not just make it for themselves, but help deal with the problems we have. Climate change is the worst crisis in the history of humanity, and that's saying a lot.
Right. And I want to talk a little bit in a second about the pandemic and how to kind of coaches and athletes through this time. But when we think about transformational coaching, and I've had some incredible ones that just man, when they coach me, my heart just throbs, it resonates and it vibrates. But when we think about transactional coaching, does it have a place at all in the process? Like, is there a time where a coach needs to be transactional, or does it just not have a place at all in coaching, period?
Well, let me characterize what I think transactional coaching is. Like, if you play really hard for me, I'll treat you well. I'll be nice to you. As your coach, I'll give you opportunity to play, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think about my wife, and um, one of the things she said to me recently is like, when I first met her, she said, "You were really skinny and you had this long stringy hair, and I wasn't attracted to you at all." But we were working together in a school for emotionally disturbed kids, and it was her first day of work. And she had bus duty. And these were kids who were very tough behavior problems. They were bussed in from all over the city of St. Paul, Minnesota to this school, the Behavioral Learning Center. And the bus was 45 minutes to an hour late because these kids were just running riot on the school bus. And she was the bus aide. She was supposed to control them. And she got off the bus and she looked like she was going to fall apart. So I said, "Hey, I know you got recess duty today. Would you like me to take it for you so you can rest a little bit?" And she said, she told me, she later told her therapist, like, "He really saw me." Now, was I doing that on a transactional basis? Like
Right.
I would say the transactional basis is a transition phase to get to the transformational phase.
Got it. I like that.
And if you stay in the transactional phase, you're not going to live the life that you could have lived.
Yeah, I like that. Now, with the pandemic, with it, from week to week, month to month, things change for all levels of athletic programs. What would be your message to coaches and athletes during this time?
Well, it's going to get worse. And what's going to make the difference is if we can hang together. I was doing some work. I did some work last summer at the Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico. And they asked me to come back in March, and we settled on March 10th. So went there in March. And that was just days before everything shut down. And I came up with this concept. All of us believe that all of us care about all of us. And I think I actually have some Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Um, but um, these are some drawings that my wife did for my book. This is this is a team. Each of those dots is a player, and the dot in the center is a coach. And you see the connections. So, there's the coach has a connection with that player and that player, and some players have connections with each other, but it's probably in a typical team, the coach has connections with the best players, and the best players have connections with themselves. I've seen teams where I was at a game in North Dakota in January where I grew up, and this one kid who didn't score very much, but he really hard player and played good defense. He scored 10 points in the first quarter, and he never got the ball after that. It was like his teammates, like they weren't connected the way they should have been. So this is the next stage, and this is where a coach has a connection with every player, not just the players who can help them.
Connections are what gets us through the hard times. I may have mentioned earlier that when I was doing a podcast with John Gordon, I asked him where toughness comes from, and he said from connections. And our society and our world is really set up to divide us. It used to be that we, grew up in a small town, farming community. Everybody knew everybody. There was all kinds of connections. I could go out the door of my house when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and my mom could be secure in that everybody in town knew me, and like half the people were related to me. Well, now, we're in a much different society. So I think the number one thing that coaches can do, people can do to get through this really tough time, and I do want to say times are going to get tougher. This is not the worst by any means, is to help make connections. And I think I showed you. Now I don't know what I do with them. Oh, they're there. I think we might have gotten interrupted just when I was showing these connections about or these drawings about what I call an all of us team. All of us know that all of us care about all of us. And if we look at, this is a drawing my wife did for the book. If we look at the centered dot as the coach and the other dots as the athletes, and you see the connections there, and the coach is connected to a bunch of players, but not all of them. And some of the players are connected to each other. I realized I gave you the wrong one first. This is the one with the coach connected only to a few. This is better. This is the coach connected to every player. But a lot of the players aren't connected to very many people. And this is the goal of a coach. This should be the goal of a coach. Wow. And all of us culture, every player is connected with the coach and with every other player. And you think about the strength of this kind of a relationship when hard times come. And the hard times could be, your star player got injured, you lost the game you thought you were going to win, you qualify for state tournament, but they don't hold a state tournament. Right. And then think about the strength of this kind of team in dealing with those kinds of problems. It also helps you not have so many problems. It helps you get through the tough times. Right. So I think that connection piece is really, really important.
Well, that picture for me, it represents culture, connectedness with culture. And when you think about maybe because I'm kinesthetic, I felt that picture, meaning there was a lot of connection dots, hence connecting with the whole group, the whole program, the whole culture. And that's something I've been talking a lot about with my athletes is, this is the moment where I think we stay connected to our craft. I always talk about doing all the hard work in the dark so you can shine in the light. So let's do that work. Let's stay connected to our craft. And then also let's stay connected to the people that feed us. Make sure that, that, because right now there's a lot of fear-based thinking. And during the pandemic, if you can feed your craft and you can feed your energy, receive and give, with the people that are good and they're going to feed you. I think this is a way that we can see an opportunity with this pandemic.
You know, there's a study. It was covered in the New York Times Magazine several years ago. It's called the Aristotle study, and it was looking at teams at Google. Many teams, some of whom were very successful, some who were okay, some who weren't so successful. And, you know, you don't get hired at Google unless you're smart, you know, and you want to work hard. You know, maybe there's some mistakes, but basically it's people want to work there. And so every group had people who were smart, that worked hard. The conclusion from the study was what caused the teams to be successful was psychological safety.
Oh, wow.
That when you felt that you could be yourself, instead of covering up a mistake, you could say, wow, I just screwed up. You know, that is what caused those teams at Google to be successful. And I think it's very similar in a sports team of kids, even all the way up to the pros, that can I be myself? Will people accept me if I don't put up a big front?
Right. And you know, what comes up for me is that when you can be yourself, you're allowing yourself to be the best version of yourself, but there's an element of being free. You can operate a little more freer, and you're not posing this look that you have to, you know, that you're sufficing for somebody, this outside force. You can actually just be yourself and allow yourself to be free to perform.
I read a book. I think I had a anthropology class or something in college like 50 years ago, a long time ago, and it was called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. It was way ahead of its time, but it's like the different ways we present ourselves to the world to make ourselves look good, to make ourselves feel good about ourselves. And one of the great things about a team is that can be relaxed. I don't know if you watched the Last Dance, the show
Oh yeah,
about the
for sure.
10 hours of the
Right.
bowls. And there was, I remember this, you know, we got WGN in North Dakota, got WGN, which carried all the Bulls games. So my parents were Bulls fanatics. I was living somewhere else at the time, but I remember the game where Scottie Pippen stayed on the bench. Michael had gone to play baseball, and Scottie was thinking I should take the last shot, and Phil Jackson put together a play for Tony Kukoc, and Kukoc made the basket, and they won. And they went into the locker room, and Phil locked the doors. Nobody got in, and they just talked it out. And Scottie apologized, and everybody forgave him. I think that's just such a lovely story, because it could have been so easy for Phil to have gone off on him, for Michael Jordan to have gone off on him, and Phil didn't allow that to happen. We're all going to go in there, and we're going to talk it out, and when we come out, we're a team again.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that part of Last Dance. And you know what I love about that transformational coaching? I believe what he exudes that is when you have this, you create a space. You have enough space for your players to move. Is, you know, like we were talking earlier about the transactional of, you know, doing it my way, and you know, there's no movement in transactional. And just knowing your players first, knowing how to coach the heart of the athlete, but just allowing them to have this space, but also conjuring and fostering and cultivating the energy for us to actually be a team and talk this stuff out.
Yes.
It's awesome. It's great. I love it.
I don't talk things anymore. I talk about team conversations. And, you know, many coaches, maybe most coaches, start practice. You know, the kids are coming from having sat in a classroom for whatever, and they want to move. And the first thing a coach does is sit them down and talk to them for 20 minutes.
Okay.
So I talk about having 1 to 2 minute conversations, and a bunch of them, not just one at the beginning, one at the end, but throughout. So, and you get people to say what's on their mind, and you can ask and this is leadership. You can ask your best players. You can say something like, and take one of them aside and say, you know, you're one of the most talented players on the team, and I really need your help. I really need you to be a leadership. leadership role. We all have emotional tanks. I don't call them emotional tanks anymore because those are gasoline tanks and we're moving towards electric vehicles. So we all have an emotional battery that needs to be recharged.
Yeah.
And so you, player, can you be a leader? Can, when you look around the team, think about the players who might not feel comfortable as much. And can you say something to them that will charge their battery? I think about, who do I want to work with? Who do I want to live with? Who do I want to be part of? It's people who charge each other's batteries, who are positive with each other. And that doesn't mean you don't have the hard conversations. I had one of my last conversations with Bill Walsh. I interviewed him, and he was talking about a kid who he couldn't explode. He wasn't hitting people hard enough, and he said to the kid, maybe this game isn't for you. And the kid says, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you got to explode off the line. And so I said, well, he said that to the kid alone, separately, not in front of everybody else.
Right.
I said, well, what happened next day? And he said, the kid came back and he was exploding. So you have those hard conversations, but you do it in a sense of caring. I remember John Gardner, who started Common Cause and the White House Fellows Program, was a mentor of mine. I was so lucky that he said he could be a good boxer if the opponent would stand still. So he wasn't a good boxer. And he got cut from the boxing team, and the coach said, you're a really good athlete. You're not a boxer, but you're a really good athlete. Look. And he became in those days it was Pac 6 maybe, or Pac 8. Well, certainly wasn't Pac 12, but it might have been only Pac 6. But Pacific Athletic Conference, he became an all-conference swimmer. Now, a coach could have cut him in a way that would discourage somebody from even continuing, but he said, no, you're a good athlete. Boxing is just not your sport.
Interesting. And Jim, I could talk for hours with you on all these different topics.
Can I say one more thing about team culture?
Yeah.
Coaches want to win. Everybody wants to win. I only knew one coach that didn't care about winning, because that's the currency we trade in. Are you a good coach? What was your win-loss record?
Exactly.
But this idea of a double O coach that we developed at Positive Coaching Alliance, yeah, you are trying to win. That's the first goal. But the second more important goal is using sports to teach life lessons. So you make connections with the kids who you think can help you win. And then you often ignore the other kids. So the baseball coach at Stanford, and I'm forgetting his name right now, he played at Stanford, then he went coach Cal for a while and came back to Stanford. And he talked about making connections among the players. That in practice, they would have meetings and they would have one player at a time tell their story, their life story. What do they like? And he said, you might be the only player on that baseball team who likes chess, you think. And then you find out somebody else likes chess, or I like country music, or whatever it is. So one of the things coaches can do is, first of all, make connections with every kid. And make sure you make those connections with the kids who aren't the best athletes. In some ways, that's more important. And then create ways for the kids to make connections with each other. So pair them up. One of my favorite tools is the buddy system, where you pair kids up and you say, okay, I want you to do this drill, but at the same time, I want you to fill not the emotional tank, recharge the emotional battery of your buddy.
Right.
And then the kids come back and you say, okay, who got their tank charged? I mean, I'm having the transition. Your battery charged. And you don't get discouraged if there's not much going on, because you keep at it. And these kids then become connected to each other. And that's where you get that web of connections that makes a team really successful.
You know what I like about that? And I wish I could remember her name, but I believe this was years back, but it was the head coach for University of Florida for the softball team. And what she would do is she did the same thing that you were explaining, but every week she would team up a different, pair up two athletes, And every week they would have to, it was either once a week or twice a week, they would have to have lunch and dinner. They called them dates, but they probably can't say that now. But anyways, but what they did was each week they would get a lunch and a dinner with a different athlete. And then if they ran through the whole team, they would still keep on doing it, even if they've already met with that person throughout that season. But they would come up in front of the team and they'd have to share one thing that they learned about that person.
I love that. I love
Right.
that.
And it
I'm
was
going to
just,
put that in my book.
yeah, it's awesome. And it's always stuck out like how powerful that is. Cause man, you can just spend a little bit of time with someone and you just ask a question. You learn so much. You think you know somebody when you play throughout a season, but man, when you can get out of the environment, you could really, really not only just learn more about the person, but understand their energy and connect with them. Like you're talking about like charging, I call plugging in. Like I want to plug into your socket and I want you to plug into my socket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Dave Esker is the Stanford baseball coach.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Great coach. And I love that story about having kids come back. You give them an assignment.
Yeah.
And the research tends to show that kids do not take what they learn from one arena to another. So what they're learning in sports, maybe they learn to try really, really hard in sports because it's so important to them. They don't necessarily think, oh, if I tried that hard in math, maybe I could get a better grade. And so it's important for coaches to make that transfer, to say, you guys are working really hard. Think about how much better you are today than we were 3 weeks ago when we started the season. What if you gave that kind of effort in your classes? So I think that idea of, and I have what I call a take it home exercise, especially with the emotional battery. That once the kids on your team understand the concept of the emotional battery and how important it is to recharge people's batteries, you say, okay, next week when we have practice, next Monday when we have practice, I'm going to ask you, this is your assignment, find somebody not on the team, somebody in your family, somebody at school, and charge their battery. Do something or say something that will recharge their batteries. And then I'm going to ask you about it when you come back. And then maybe on Wednesday, I'll say, are you guys remembering the assignment, the take it home assignment? And again, if people kind of, don't get it at first, that's okay, because you keep at it. And I'll tell you, when people charge each other's batteries, Maya Angelou said, you forget this about a person, you forget that about a person. What you never forget is how they made you feel.
Exactly.
And what if you had a whole team of kids who were charging each other's batteries all the time?
Man, it's so great that you just brought that up, because my wife just brought that up yesterday. It was in a different context, but she brought up that exact same statement, and it's true. It's how we make people feel, and it's important. And I think that's why charging batteries, really teaching young athletes about their energy. I believe, because there's so many things that are really important to development, to team dynamics and coaching. But I think at the basis of all of it is energy. What is our energy? How do we cultivate it? And when we don't have enough energy, what can we do in the moment to enhance it? Not to get us to 100%, but if we're 40%, how can I get to 50 or 60%? Right?
Yeah, our mental state can overcome a lot of situations. And my son, Gabriel Thompson, wrote a book called Working in Shadows. He spent a year doing jobs that Mexican immigrants do that American citizens don't want to do. And he was in a chicken slaughterhouse in North Carolina. And there were three groups of people. There were blacks, there were whites, and there were Mexicans. They actually were Guatemalans, but the people called them Mexicans.
Right.
And the blacks and the whites, it was a horrible work condition. Gabriel came home every day for the month or 2 months he did it, and he had to take all these painkillers because it was so. Anyway, so the blacks and the whites hated what they were doing, and they were discouraged. The
Mm.
Guatemalans were like, this is so much better than doing tomatoes in Florida. We are on the upward, and our kids are going to go to college. And that, the reality for all three of those groups was the same. But the attitude was, oh man, I'm stuck in this dead end thing, versus this is horrible, but it's better than it was, and we're on an upward swing. And
Right.
coaches can do that. Coaches can say, it can reframe. It's really reframing.
Totally. Totally. That's, as soon as you started saying that, I'm like, that's a great reframe. And I think reframing is a skill. It's really, to me, it makes sense and it's really easy on paper, but you have to practice it and challenge yourself with when you have a tough practice or you have a tough situation or a tough game, how can you use those opportunities to enhance that skill?
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, this is one of my favorite questions because it's about reflection, and I believe for us to learn and develop and to get better is to reflect. So when you think about
Absolutely.
your whole career, what do you think you've learned the most about yourself?
That I can persevere in spite of all the FUDs I have. I think we talked about FUDs earlier:
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
uncertainty, and doubt. And I have a lot. I mean, I think people, would see me and they think, oh, things are easy for Jim. But I get up in the morning so often just consumed with FUDs. And I've learned that I can persevere anyway. I can keep going. A lot of that's due to my wife, Sandra, who I think I mentioned before. She's my spiritual guide. And spirituality for me is, the definition I really like is, it's the practical ways we orient ourselves to the sacred. So it's not about what you believe. It's not about what church you go to. It's the things you do, the practical ways you orient yourself to the sacred. And then sacred means the things of ultimate value. So it could be God. People could have a God or a higher power. Whatever it is the most sacred for you. Are you orienting yourselves towards that? Are you doing just like it was so struck again by the Last Dance of the kind of workouts that Michael Jordan did. And when he started playing baseball, he had to have different workouts for baseball.
Yeah.
And in sports, we try to eat the right stuff. We try to get enough sleep. We work on our skills and stuff. There's a discipline there, and spirituality is the same discipline. It's like, do I meditate or pray? Do I experience gratitude? Do I really focus on being grateful for what I have? Do I try to charge the tanks of the people around me? Do I try to make things better? I mentioned earlier the idea of an elevator, which is I think a huge concept. Again, elevator with an ER, not OR.
Right.
Someone who in every situation tries to make it better. Am I trying to do that?
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jim, you've written a lot of books, which I love, and I know you're going about to release probably your last one. You said
Last one on youth sports.
There you go. There you go. Well, share with my listeners a little bit about it, if you will, and then how they can reach out to you, connect with you, and learn more about you as a whole.
My email address is jim@positivecoach.org. Okay. So people can reach me there. If this book I'm working on were a pitch, like a pitch for a movie, it would be Youth Sports Meets Climate Change. When I started learning about climate change, it was the amount of suffering going on in the world already, and the amount of suffering that's coming down our way, and much of it's unavoidable at this point, but we can avoid a bunch of it. And youth sports becomes even more important. You could say, "Wow, if the world's we're going to global collapse, what about youth sports?" It's just the opposite. It's so important what coaches do now. So the idea behind the book, Eric Erickson in I mentioned this before, early 70s, he coined this term generativity. The kind of people we need to deal with this vast, new, harsh world are high generatively people who are thinking about the future, how to make the future better. Now that's a little bit of a hard concept for kids. So the identity I really focus on with kids is be an elevator. Every situation, what's going on here? You're upset with your sister. Well, what can you do to make the situation better? You realize how hard your parents are working to deal with this. Maybe your parents got laid off because so many people are losing jobs. Is there something you can do to make the situation better? On this team, is there something you can do to make the situation better? So a guy named Dan McAdams, who's a psychology professor at Northwestern, took Erik Erikson's research to a different level. And he said, what are the qualities of highly generative people? And he came up with 6. A sense of purpose early in life, high degree of empathy, character, steadfast character, the ability to turn rut stories into river stories. He had a different term for it, but I think rut story keeps you where you are. Oh, I can't get out of this. A river story helps you move on. What were the other 2? Anyway, there are 2 more. And this book is explaining to coaches how you can help your kids become elevators, become highly generative people, which has 2 benefits. One is it's going to help them survive. I can't overstate how bad things are going to get. And our leaders are doing nothing. Not all of them, but many of them are doing nothing to resolve climate change. It's going to get really bad. So helping kids develop the mental toughness, the ability to be an elevator is really important for them. And it's really important for our society because we need lots and lots of those people. Jack Clark, the rugby coach at Cal, I won't get this exactly right, but he said, it's not 1 or 2 smart people that we're missing. What we need are lots and lots of people standing shoulder to shoulder with their noses pointed in the same direction to solve the problems we have. And you learn that in team sports. Yeah. So this book is really about how can we prepare kids to survive and thrive and to help our whole world survive and thrive. I'm really excited about it. You can probably tell.
I love it. I can't wait to read it. Well, Jim, this is literally you're just a wealth of knowledge. You have so much to offer. And I think we need to bring you back and talk about more topics because I think there's so much more that you can share and educate and inform my listeners. And this has been a treat. This has been an honor. And thanks for sharing your energy and your journey.
Well, I really enjoyed it, Grant. I think you're a terrific interviewer, and it was really a fun conversation.
Awesome.
So I'll come back.
Perfect.